So this is going to be a pretty short video. I don't have a way to like screen record and fancy editing tools to show you my Goodreads year in review as I'm talking about it. So hopefully you enjoy enough of my face to keep watching. I actually set a reading goal a couple of years ago to read 100 books and failed miserably. And then slowly and surely every year since then I've gotten a little bit better about reading books. I would like to thank my graphic novel and Shakespeare class for helping me get to where I am today, because without them and their very quick plays and graphic novels, I would not have these numbers. I actually read a total of 102 books this year, which is, it just feels really good that I was able to be that productive in the middle of a pandemic. That's not to say people who read less than that weren't as productive, but it means a lot to me personally that I was able to accomplish that within just craziness. I would not be here without audiobooks and the ability to listen to books while I did work or cleaned my house. This is really the year where I kind of was sold on audiobooks as a viable media form, and I think that's about the only way I'm going to get books read this upcoming semester, driving to and from my internship, because that's a 30-minute drive there and back. I can finish an audiobook in about a week, hypothetically. So it's, you know, it's good to have that route to go. I still like physical books, and I really do like to hold them in my hand to read them, but I'm definitely a fan of the audiobooks this year. But that's what helped me get to 102, hands down. I actually read 28,051 pages. I don't think I read very big books this year, and I'll get to that when we talk about the longest and shortest books. But I mean, that seems okay to me. I don't track page counts. When people do their stats at the end of the year and they have page read, mainly because to me it seems arbitrary. Do you count the first index pages? Does the Goodreads page matter, or you have to find a certain edition that you're reading to count those? Does that page that it tells you, does that count the appendixes and indents and the original blank pages? I don't know what those pages mean. It's an arbitrary number, and it doesn't matter. It's either a big book or it's not a big book. But did you read the book? Did the book get done? I don't care about my page number, but 28,000, whatever. The shortest book I read was The Haunting of Beatrix Green. It was 23 pages long. I find that very difficult to believe because I also read The Horla and The Mask of the Red Death. And, there's another one too, but very, very short stories that I know were less than 23 pages. But again, that's where I've got this issue with page count being how we determine length, because it really matters what edition it is and what format and all kinds of factors. That page count just seems arbitrary. And by extension, the longest book I read was 659 pages. It was The Shining by Stephen King. And I know in my brain that is the biggest book I read this year, but it doesn't feel like it. Like, I saw that come up and I'm like, there's no way that's the longest book I read, but it is. The average book length in 2020, was that for me? Was 275 pages. That tracks. I think usually I tend to read 300 to 400 page books. Not on purpose, but like that's just what I kind of gravitate toward. So the most popular book that I read this year, with 5,341,359 people shelving it, was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And if you remember way back when, I read that in the spring, which it's not like I was up here a lot during spring, because I was reading a classic novel a week and making lesson plans for it. But I read The Great Gatsby back in spring. I'm going to reread it this month to make sure I've got it in my head for school. And to be honest with you, if I have to sit there and read that book out loud in Zoom meetings to these kids, I will be counting it a third time. Like, just full stop. The least popular book that I read this year, with 29 people shelving it, was Choice and Voice by Stephanie Fleck and Jolene Heineman, who I follow both on Instagram now, on their joint Instagram, Choice Voice Teach. This is an amazing book. It's about this thing called the Collaborative Reader Workshop, where you give students choice in their reading, and it's to create equity and interest in reading. It increases test scores. They become better writers, because you're marrying this idea that they are responsible for the choices they make and what they read. They do daily reading, and they respond to prompts, and then they discuss the reading at specified times in the year. This stuff works, and they managed to make it work during virtual learning too. I've been watching their stories of their kids telling them how great it was to have this workshop. Because I love you guys so much, I'm actually going to link a video I did about this book that I did not post on this channel because I did a review book report sort of on this textbook for one of my classes this past fall. So I have a full video, like YouTube review of this that goes into detail about the system a little bit. It's got a lot of teacher talk, so that's why I didn't put it on this channel, and also I didn't want my teacher to find this channel. But it's a very, very interesting book, and I go into more detail there. So I'm just going to link that unlisted video in the description or in a pinned comment if you feel like listening to me talk like a teacher for a little while. It's a very different vibe. My average rating for 2020 was a 3.6, and that tracks. I usually tend to give people 3s unless it blows my mind and then it gets a 4 or a 5, and I'm very stingy with my 5s too. The highest rated book that I read on Goodreads was Choice and Voice. It has like a perfect 5-star average. I'm telling you, the few people who have read this, the few educators that you see in the comments of this book, love this book. It even has, and I talk about this again in the like specific video about it, it has book lists in the back for your students. So Are You Afraid of the Dark? It has scary novels, Family, Love, and Loss. It's more serious stuff. We got genre benders, so things like The Poet X is up here. Get Your Thrills, you got thrillers, and this book just came out this year, so this is a very updated list. And again, if I will link their Instagram too. They are always doing what they call book talks, which are like trailers for the books that they recommend, and it's just, oh, it's so informative. And even if you're not teaching, this is a really good way to look at books that you may just be reading for the aesthetics of like Bookstagram or BookTube with a more critical lens, and what discussions you can have based on those books. My first review of the year was for The Death Ray by Daniel Klaus. I gave it 2 stars, which is hilarious. And I just said, wow, in lowercase letters with a period. So there's that. My last review of the year was for Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I said, forever a favorite. Dickens is incredibly funny and timely, contextually that is. And this is such a short book with a familiar enough plot that I always recommend this as a starter for folks looking to get into classics. And I've said that on this channel quite a few times. I do believe that if you are going to get into classics, A Christmas Carol is a good way to go. Now, my challenge for this year, my Goodreads challenge, was for 62 books. And what I usually do is take the number of books I actually read and add 1 number to it. So if I go to my Goodreads challenge, 2016 was the first year I started keeping track. I only read 19 out of the 30 that I wanted to read, which drives me nuts. 2017, I read 44 out of a goal of 32. 2018, I read 41 out of a goal of 40. And 2019, I read 61 out of a goal of 60. So this year, my goal was 62. So it was just 1 more than I did last year. So I'm like, okay, I know I can do 61. 62 is only 1 more. I will not be doing that this year. I will not be putting 103 on my reading challenge because I know how hard 100 was for me to get to. I will probably just do, I'm thinking, 63 because that's only 1 more than what my goal was for this year. And I usually don't change. I like to see how much ahead of the goal I get. I don't like to adapt it to give myself more of a challenge. If anything, that gives me more of the challenges to increase the number over what I originally challenged myself to read. That's a lot of challenges in a row. But I think my Goodreads for this year is going to be 63 books. I don't think it's going to be hard to get that, especially if I listen to audiobooks and I read some plays and some graphic novels. Keep it to like shorter books during the semester, and then I can read the long books in the summer. But that was my Goodreads year in review. It's always interesting to see kind of what the stats are at the end. I don't think about that stuff. Again, I know other booktubers do, but I just don't care. Like, it's the overall number for me. It's really not what genres I gravitated toward or page numbers I read or what was the most popular or least popular. But I do recommend that Choice and Voice book. So check that out.